I don't know what is your stance on immigration, but I do think that the discussion around it, which is spreading actually all over the Western world mainly. When I was in Russia, I didn't notice this immigration being an issue. I mean, the only time I heard about it, like in a harsher tone, was after the recent events, the terrorist attack on this theater. What was the name? Croc Park, was it? I don't recall. Sorry. But aside from that, it's not a big issue. Unlike in the West, I always take, of course, I take Portugal as an example because it's where I live. I do worry in checking other sources to see if it's the same, and surprise, surprise, it's exactly the same. Now in Europe, the immigration has been, I mean, it's not, it didn't start yesterday or last year. European countries have always had immigration, mainly from the places that they had colonized before, and I think this has something to do. I'm pretty sure it has something to do with the language which they speak, and so they search for a country where they can have better life, and they already speak the language. Recently, we have new waves of immigration. For example, from the sub-Saharan Africa, people escaping extreme poverty only to find themselves at the hands of slavers in Libya, and then many of them drown in the Mediterranean. This is a kind of immigration. And we have other kind, which is people who come to work, but they come from very far away. They come from countries like Bangladesh and India and Nepal and some other countries, Sri Lanka, and they come to work. They try to come to work in Europe, and one wonders why suddenly this interest of these workers in this part of the world. Well, the thing is, they are recruited, as far as I could know, they are recruited, and they are very handy for multinational enterprises that come and settle here, for example, in agriculture, which they specialize in, red berries and black berries and berries, which are meant to be served on the table at home. So it's not like they can be picked by machines. They have to be hand picked, so they keep their original shape. They don't get smashed. So this kind of agriculture requires a lot of work, a lot of handwork, a lot of manpower. And tell me if you think it's a coincidence or not that these agricultural companies settle in, and then waves of these migrants start to come. In Spain is the same, where they have this kind of activity, where they have booming agriculture, intensive agriculture. There you have these migrants from the Far East. But the narrative on the media and from certain political parties is that this is uncontrolled immigration. We have to do something about it because they are replacing us. They are, among other silly phrases they make people say. they spread these ideas. We are losing our identity and our culture. I mean, some of these people never read a book in their lives, and they speak in this manner because they heard someone speak. They think their identity is white. In Portugal, it's a good joke, right? In many parts of Europe, it's a good joke. This white supremacy shit is behind all these ideas, and they are conveyed to the public by this new right-wing populist parties. They try to capitalize. I cannot deny that there is a culture shock, and they try to capitalize on it for votes. So, for example, if you have an specific area in which they have like very intensive agriculture concentrated, you will have hundreds, thousands of these migrants walking around, wandering around, and this seems to bother people. Well, not everyone, of course. The ones that have a little bit of gray matter in their head seem to be fine with it, as long as, for example, you don't have increasing numbers of crime or other society problems. But you do have problems due to this, to the sudden presence of extra thousands of persons. But they make it look like they are coming here to take advantage somehow of social security, take advantage of I don't know. Some even say, oh, they come and they look at our women. You know, very caveman talk. This is for me. This is quite disturbing, because in one hand we have problems, of course, because every community which gets suddenly overpopulated, for example, their public services, access to every kind of service, not just healthcare, education, they get overloaded, and then the quality of the service, which many times it was already being degraded before, it gets worse now, right? So the trick that these populists, which like to convey hate, because this is basically what they do, they convey hate towards these immigrants, and they seem like they convince people that they want to solve the problem with very basic measures, just like close the borders, Trump style, build a wall, just like that. I mean, they don't really matter if there are children involved or whatever. And they go on. They embark on this idea that the only thing that we need to do is to close ourselves, and then they start to spread slogans like the Portuguese first, whatever that means. We have half of our population in other countries, so I don't really know. And when we tell them that, there's always a counter argument, but very, very nasty one. For example, when we tell them like, you have to bear in mind that millions of Portuguese are living in other countries. They went as immigrants to search for a better life as well. And they immediately say, yeah, but they don't behave like these animals behave. Okay, this is where it comes the culture shock, which you have people from the Far East, in India and Bangladesh. And I do, there are different people, dark skin, different habits, different religions. And this seems to be also, they tend to hang around together. This somehow intimidates people. I never had any trouble, never felt intimidated, but apparently some people do. Sorry if I'm going on and on too long about this immigration, but it's really a subject of the day, don't you think? It's a lot of people are talking about it. And why do I think these arguments that go in favor of segregation and closing our borders fail? They fail in multiple fronts. Because, first of all, the people that complain about immigration fail to realize, and this is one of the roles of bear in mind this is one of the roles of this right-wing populism. They're not there to solve the problem. They're there to make it worse on behalf of someone. Okay? And so they convince people that the only way it's segregation and hate. Actually, they do promote hate towards these people. And of course it doesn't solve anything. It isn't a lawless country yet. And so immigrants are still here, and they are needed. They are needed for the employers that exploit their work. They are needed for people who own houses, who suddenly stopped renting houses to families, normal families, to pack like in a 4-people house, they pack like 20 immigrants. No rules, no nothing, no hygiene. But they get much more money from it. So a lot of these people exploit these immigrants. They like it. It's a good rent suddenly. So they are accomplices of human trafficking, if you notice this. And the big bosses, they earn, I mean, these agricultural companies, they export in millions of euros. All of that from their work. And then these people, most of them, don't have a decent place to stay. Some of them try to bring their family, and they bring. They cannot find a house. They work, all right, many of them in this agriculture, but it's like season work. They are on and off work. They work 6 months, then they are laid off. Then they work a couple of months more, and they're laid off again. And they gravitate in this region towards this work. They gravitate around this work, but they cannot do much more than that. They cannot afford the house with their wages. They can hardly afford food, so they have to go to the public services. They make people angry for that. And what do we see? We see the bosses of the big companies getting richer, the landowners getting richer, the average Joe worker getting more angry. But he doesn't see, he fails to see what the real problem is, right? Because he gets, every time a person gets angry and asks why is this like that, he gets pointed in the wrong direction, if you ask me. He gets pointed like, oh, this is human trafficking, which it is. Human trafficking fault. This is a lot of mafia going around. These are their fault. This is no longer the fault of the bosses of the agriculture companies. This has become a business, a different kind of business. And I said, yeah, okay, but then if it's like you say, it's a crime. So if it's a crime, it's police matter. So if the police or the authorities do not act when there are crimes, what are they doing? What are they doing? They are under the responsibility of the politicians that you elected. Right? But still, I don't think that's the answer. If they are kept, if there is a culture of hate towards these immigrants, this is my thesis, right? If there is a culture of hate towards these immigrants, which is being bred and augmented in the news, I mean, constantly, either by the news outlets themselves, or either by these left-wing parties appealing to the lowest of the emotions of the people. If they are kept marginalized, if they are kept hated, if they are kept second-rate citizens, they are easier to exploit. People don't nurture any friendship for them, people don't help them, authorities tend to leave things behind. Which way? Undermanned and under budget authorities. And they degrade the salary of the indigenous workers, which is true, it's a fact. I mean, if you don't want for this salary, I go get a couple of immigrants there, they'll work for half of that. It's like this. So this is actually, and the immigrants, because they don't have any rights, they are marginalized, they are hated, they cannot claim, they cannot well, they can, but they do not feel empowered to do unionize and get together and fight decently, not violently, but decently for their own rights, to increase their wages and to increase their conditions of living, because all this is about is class warfare. These arguments of the left wing are putting workers against workers. And while, if the people do not realize this, we're gonna have problems in the medium term. Let me explain why. Because most of the immigrants now are first generation. They don't, I mean, it's no crime. It's negligible any crime increase. There are some troubles mainly within their communities. I mean, I don't wonder. They are packed in shitty houses. Big tension there. So imagine yourself in that position, living in just a mattress with 2 square meters on the floor. That's all space you have. Do you feel like a real citizen with full rights? I don't think so. But you have some of these families have their kids already in school, and if this keeps happening, this culture, this marginalizing culture keeps being fermented, what you will have is second generation marginalized, which will rebel, which will be more prone to crime if they feel completely marginalized, which will be more prone to violence and more prone to resist. We have seen this in many other places where this happened. On the other hand, if you have a decent immigration policy and you do not underman or under budget your services, your public services, in order to accommodate, to give support, to teach the language, for example, because people complain about the culture shock. So what's the best thing to dissipate the culture shock? Is to learn the language. I mean, I've seen success in immigration policies in other countries. For example, I remember when I was in Finland, they had this immigration system there that immigrants would apply for asylum, for example. They would come in, they would spend months learning culture and language. Then they would be in touch with these authorities that handle employment. They would be sent to companies that need. They would be put in society, even if it's not the ideal, because I do have a lot of criticism towards this society and this capitalist society. I do not think we're talking about immigrants, but I'm a worker myself, and I see all the workers around me. I mean, most of the qualified Portuguese have to leave still to find a decent life, because even if the wage here is much bigger than India or Bangladesh, it's not enough to buy a house. It's not enough for a living, for a decent living, to have a house and raise a family, and it's not enough. Simply as that. So I think it's very poisonous ideas in speech when we demonize immigrants because there are many simply because of that. And if you think, put yourself in their shoes, and then put yourself in their shoes and imagine someone was just trying to get rid of you like you get rid of mosquitoes or flies. They don't care if you end up dead or tortured or whatever. You're a lesser human. This is the ideas that are being projected. And of course, like I said, the right-wing populists will not solve this matter. They will, even if they are in power, they will not solve this. Because they will. One thing they do is they might cut rights to immigrants. That they will do, but that will only favor the situation I just mentioned. Will only favor the bosses and the exploiters, putting them in more vulnerable, putting these immigrants in more vulnerable situation at the hands of these people. Then, if you suddenly see violence, you have to look at the timeline. Violence didn't come with immigration. Violence came with segregation. Yeah, it's this right-wing populists. They are put here to do the dirty work of the people in power. It's all it is. And the average Joe fails to understand this, and it's like I don't like to speak like this because I don't like to look like I'm in the enlightened position that I see what everyone does not see. It's not about that. But one thing is for sure, I see people that are misled. This is a fact, and they act accordingly, being misled, and they tend to repeat this speech, and nothing good is made out of this. I can only see a bleak future if we continue like this. What can we do? We have to fight in the information space, right? But it's an unfair fight, because I see a lot of this concerning the digital space. I see a lot of people with this hate speech being funded. It's not just like it's easy as creating a YouTube channel. You have to put a lot of work in the YouTube channel. And ultimately, if you want to boost it, if you want to give it the first boost, you have to pay for YouTube to boost your clips, and then you can start the cycle. And a lot of these people, they are funded by people who have a lot of money. So you see, there are interests there. And yeah, this is my thoughts for today. I really don't like hate speech, any kind of hate speech. When you say, when then you have people going to the ridicule of believing, for example, that black people are inferior, or any other race are lazy or inferior, like we had this kind of statements in the parliament very recently. Guess done by who, right? It's kind of worrying. People are people. I think the factor that weighs more on their behavior is their upbringing. So far as I know, so far as I've seen different societies, this is this is correct. It's not just because you're born a different color, a different race, or whatever. You are taught, direct or indirectly, throughout your life, to be the way you are. Of course, we have some differences, some traces, some unique features, but generally this is what I see. Right? I see you, I hope, on the next one.